Hello, everyone, and welcome back to another episode of Behind the Smile. Today's guest is Nick Jonsson, a global keynote speaker, best-selling author, and mental health advocate who's ranked the world's #1 thought leader on executive loneliness. After walking his own path through recovery and sobriety, Nick now helps leaders move beyond burnout and isolation to find real connection, balance, and purpose. Nick's story of despair to transformation is nothing short of inspirational. Now happily remarried, he lives a life he once thought was out of reach. And he doesn't just talk about resilience, he embodies it. Through his work, he's redefining what it means to lead in today's world. So joining us from Phuket, Thailand, Nick, welcome to Behind the Smile. How are you today?
Thank you so much, Ash, for the warm welcome. I'm absolutely fantastic. Thank you so much.
That's great. I'm so excited for this conversation today. We were just chatting before we started recording and you were mentioning that you're currently in Thailand. I thought you might have been in Singapore, but you mentioned that you move around quite a lot. So maybe just to start the conversation, to let the audience know a little bit more about you, could you let us know, where do you live? What does an average day look like for you? And what do you do for fun?
Yeah, so basically I'm a nomad. For 2.5 years ago, I'm traveling around mainly Asia, but all over the world. I actually spent 2.5 months in Europe also this year, traveling around, speaking at conferences and events, also leading leadership retreats and workshops and trainings and so on. And if I'm looking in my passport, actually I spent most of the time the last year in the Maldives working with leaders there. I just came back from another 3 weeks in the Maldives, and Phuket, Thailand is sort of my back office these days. That's where I love also to work, because outside I have beautiful cycling. I have a beach less than 1 kilometer away. I can swim in the ocean and so on. So for me to be close to nature, be close to sport is a priority these days.
That sounds amazing. Is travel something that you've always loved to do, or is that something that's kind of been revealed to you once you got sober and started to create this big, beautiful life?
I've always loved traveling, but it was never this much as now. But it just comes due to the demand, just working with more and more companies around the world and doing workshops to help them with connect with themselves and connect with their colleagues, because that's something that I identified was lacking in the workplace. So that's what takes me around, and I'm truly blessed with that.
And how do you then manage, because you're remarried now, how do you manage sort of being home and balancing family life with work life? I imagine that would be really challenging at times.
I'm fortunate enough that my wife joined me on at least half of the travel. So for the
Great.
workshops, it's good to have someone support you. And she's also a speaker, and she's a former actress, TV presenter, and singer. So she really helps to bring up the energy of the room. So we're actually traveling the world half of the time at least together. But for the keynotes, I tend to travel by myself.
Well, that's fantastic. I didn't know that. I imagine you'd be quite a dynamic duo in that sense, and so cool that you get to see the world together. That's incredible. Okay, so I'm curious to know, routine is often quite integral for people who become sober, who step into a life of recovery. And for a lot of that, people means consistency, waking up in the same bed every morning and having the same sort of morning routine. So how have you managed to adapt your routine, being that you're in a different country a lot of the time?
Yeah, I think it comes down to a lot of discipline as well, right? And really, really being quite rigid with it, traveling with earplugs, eye mask, and making sure that we look after ourselves. And it's a lot of hotel resorts with buffets, and I just have set up my own formula, and just a small little thing that I do is, if you come into a buffet anywhere in the world, you come in, they have a small plate for the salad buffet, then there's the big plate for the main courses. And the kind of thing I do, I always go into get the big plate, and then I go to the salad buffet, and then I fill it with salad and the healthy stuff first. So that's some small little tips and tricks that I bring with me to look after myself when I'm on the road as well. And I also don't compromise. I don't show up on the same day for a gig. I want to come at least one day, ideally 2 days early. And I compromise a lot on the pay in terms of money over the quality of my life. So I'd rather come earlier, stay earlier, leave later, so that I also have time to really look after myself there.
Yeah, that's such a good point, isn't it? Really being able to listen to your body and realize, yeah, I could do more gigs, I could push myself more, but then what's the pay? Like, where am I going to have to pay for that? Because everything's an exchange, right? An energy exchange. If we give in one area, we're taking from another area, and it's really about finding that balance. It's something that I'm still very much on the journey of trying to find in my own life. So I really love that you implement that, and that's a really important practice for you. And discipline is absolutely key, isn't it? Being able to show up for yourself no matter what. And I loved what you mentioned about the large plate for the salad, because it's so true, isn't it? I used to travel a lot for my old job. In 2019, I took over 100 flights that year, and I was still drinking at the time. And in a way, I really loved it because I was able to just drink on planes and drink in lounges, and I wasn't looking after myself at all. But I remember people saying, oh, you're so lucky to be flying all around the world, and it looked so glamorous. But the reality was, a lot of the time it wasn't. A lot of the time it was just sitting around, not getting time to move your body and exercise, eating, food that's not super nourishing and nutritious. And so it's an added challenge. Yes, it's such a privilege to be able to see the world. But yeah, when you're spending a lot of that in hotel rooms or hotels in general, and then on airplanes, it's important to be able to really actually just look after yourself as well. So I love that you've got that down pat. That's really cool. So Nick, I've asked you to bring in a photo today. And this photo is from a time in your life where you were hiding behind a smile. So you were presenting one version of yourself to the outside world, but the truth was you were struggling on the inside. So could you please, for our audience, describe the photo that I'm bringing up on the screen right now, and then share for us what was truly going on for you at that time in your life?
Yeah, so that photo was taken in April 2018. And at that time, I had spent about 3 years after I left my successful corporate job. With that, I had basically pushed everyone away from me, including my old colleagues, boss, resigned from that work, also filed for divorce. And when I'm sitting on that chair, perhaps with a smile on my face, I would say it's a fake smile. And I talk in my book, Executive Loneliness, about smiling depression, and that's exactly what it is. I'm wearing that smile because I don't want to be asked what's going on behind that smile. And just to add to that, also at that stage, I was about 30 kilograms more than now. I had traded my healthy diet for fast food and pizza, and my gym membership basically for that bar stool. So that's what's happening there.
I mean, looking at the photo and then looking at your face across the screen from me now, there's visible differences that are really quite striking. And my photo from 5.5 years ago is quite similar, actually. But I'm curious to know, you mentioned that you traded your healthy lifestyle for this unhealthy one. So I'm assuming that leading up to this point, you were living a relatively healthy lifestyle. As you mentioned, you were married, and I'm sure at one point that was a happy marriage. And at one point you also had this fully fledging career, which I imagine was a career you'd always dreamed of. So where did the cracks start to appear now that you look back in reflection? How did you go from having what you perceived to be it all, the life that you dreamed of, to sitting on that bar stool alone some years later?
Yeah, I spent about 10 years working my way up the corporate ladder, and being a high achiever, then I only looked upwards. I remember already starting as an account executive, I only looked for the managing director position. So I would say that I elbowed my way to the top of the corporate ladder. I did everything to achieve it. But once I had achieved it, what happens then with the last promotion, I suddenly was running 72 hospitals and clinics in Indonesia, the biggest role for international SOS in the world. So I had achieved what I was striving for, but with that came a huge promotion. I got a big isolated office in the floor, and I was suddenly ripped away from all my colleagues. I no longer sat around them. I spent the lunch hour by myself, and they were scared to talk to me. And with that, then also they didn't have my back anymore, because instead they were scared of working with me. With that, then I isolated myself more and more. And I remember leaving the office as soon as I could, heading to the bar to drink, just to numb my feelings and thoughts around everything that was happening around me. with that, then my health went down. And I remember also I started to make some small mistakes in the office, but I was also scared to be exposed about that. So I lost my confidence, and that happened over a while. So that's the backstory behind it. So, and you can call me an anxious overachiever. That was who I was. And once I had once I was in charge of the office, then I no longer basically had a team to support me, and that made me so lonely, and that was the setup for what was to happen.
It's such an isolating position, isn't it? When the further you move towards the top, the more lonely you feel. And then there's that added pressure as well. You described yourself as a high achiever, and I also identify very much with that and being very type A. Can I ask, where do you think that comes from? Was there a moment in your childhood or an experience that made you really strive to be great and to have that success? And I'm also wondering if it's linked at all to any desire or need for external validation.
Yeah, so I didn't have that in me initially. Actually, I worked in constructions in Sweden for a couple of years. I was a terrible high school student and so on. And it was only when I was 22, I went back to school. I aged 22, actually. I had a motorcycle accident, so I couldn't continue working with my body in construction. And with that, I went back to high school, restudied my subject, and I actually moved to Australia, Gold Coast, in 1998, where I studied at university. And it's that journey then, falling off my first career, understanding that I have to study, being pushed into a university by those circumstances. And then I remember the talk there of the dean the first day, talking up the school, saying we have scholarships here, you can get awards, prizes if you're topping the classes and so on. And that speech really talked to me. I felt I'm given a second chance here in my life. I thought I have to take this opportunity, and I put so much pressure on myself to study really hard and deliver. But then being a bit insecure as well, English not being my first language, it was really tough. The first semesters I struggled, but about halfway into my studies, I got that scholarship. But what happened then was that I had to keep studying super hard and keep delivering scores above a certain level to keep it. And with that, I got a lot of anxiety. And I remember having some panic attacks already then. And how I dealt with them already at the university then was with alcohol. So that started already that behavior there. And I think it was by just being so anxious, so worried that if I lose this scholarship, it's loss of faith. And also then I don't know if I can afford completing my studies and so on. And that is exactly that behavior that I brought with me into the workplace as well. So that's where it came from.
With this anxious overachieving, had you ever experienced panic attacks before having that kind of pressure? And when you did have those panic attacks, what did that feel like for you?
The first time I can remember was actually at university, just those huge pressures, working for exams and so on. That was not the pressure I had as a child or as a young student. My parents didn't add any pressure on me. In fact, they never spoke about, going to university and so on. So that's pressure I added on myself. I think based on the society we live in, looking at others and then being at the university, I saw high achievers around me and I wanted to beat them. And I remember topping some classes, and then I sort of started to feel like a loser when I couldn't top a class that was in a field that I should have. So it was all self-inflicted.
And was there any kind of imposter syndrome playing out?
Oh yeah, certainly a lot as well. Yes.
Yeah, I can feel how uncomfortable that would have been and how scary. I'm curious, when you did move to Australia and then you started to, I guess, in a way, self-medicate with alcohol to manage the anxiousness, were you surprised at the drinking culture in Australia, or is that similar to back home?
It's different. Sweden at the time was more heavy drinking on the weekend and not so much during the week. And then in Australia, Gold Coast, sunny most of the year. And I was playing golf as well, and it was quite socially acceptable to drink on the golf course. In Sweden, it's more of a sport. You might see someone have a drink after, but in Australia, we even serve beers during the game, So it was quite different, and that worked really well for me. So I really enjoyed it. No one was questioning it. You could drink all the time. So yeah, I think it was the drinking culture there certainly didn't help me.
And then tell me, where did that drinking behavior start to progress? When did it start to move to a space where you thought, there might be a bit of a problem here that I need to look at?
Yeah, so I spent then, following my studies. So 2004, I moved to Asia, first Thailand, and I lived in Bangkok. I lived in Ho Chi Minh City, Jakarta, and Singapore. Those were the cities where I worked in corporate jobs and working my way up the corporate ladder, starting in advertising, PR, client servicing. Also spent a few years in the cosmetics industry, actually, as a sales manager for Oriflame, a Swedish cosmetic company. And the way then to drive the team was entertain them, karaoke nights out. And also when I was in the client side, it was clients coming from Europe, US, Australia, coming over to Asia. And it was the entertainment there as well, taking them out for dinners and so on. And being an introvert, I normally wouldn't be comfortable with those roles unless I was drinking. So it wouldn't cross my mind back then to attend the networking evening sober. It would mean that I would go for some drinks, probably first myself in case it's slow service there, and then I would drink. I would pick the networking events where it typically was free flow alcohol. That would be the best. So then I felt comfortable enough to network. So that was certainly a downward spiral. Trying to then balance that by looking after myself, being healthy, exercising, and so on. But eventually it caught up with me.
And did you ever have any incidences where perhaps you drank too much in front of work colleagues, or were there any, I suppose, consequences that you looked back at that really made you start to look at this behavior?
Not in front of someone, but behind the scene, yes. I remember one Monday morning when I had been drinking too much on the weekend, and I went to the doctor on Monday morning because I could just feel my heart was just rushing. And they gave me medication, I think, for blood pressure and all kind of stuff. But I didn't answer the doctor honestly on the questions of alcohol, so they probably didn't. They couldn't identify the issue at the time. But that was sort of 2005, 2006, I think. But after that, I didn't really think about it and it wasn't until 10 years later until it became a real issue.
And so can you help me understand the timeline from where things started to unravel? And then I've heard you talk about where you started to have almost like a physical manifestation of this stress and anxiety and mistreating your body. Can you tell me a little bit more about what you describe as a psychosomatic illness and where that happened in terms of you leaving your corporate career, leaving your marriage, and starting this downward spiral?
Absolutely. 2015 was when I resigned from my corporate job. I started to jump around from job to job. I invested some money here and there in startups, lost all of those companies and money. And at that time also then when my ex-wife started to question what was happening, what I'm doing, I wasn't ready to have that conversation. It was just too uncomfortable. So it was easier for me to just isolate further then. And she took the responsibility for our son, moved back to Sweden. And then at that time I was even more lonely then. I didn't even know what country to live in. I moved from country to country, failing at every job I took on, drinking more, not exercising as much, and it just became less and less sport in my life. And in 2018 I would say I hit my rock bottom. That's when the photo was taken with me on that smile, with a smile on my face. And at that time then my body was starting to give up more and more, and I started to have hopelessness thoughts. I didn't have suicidal thoughts, but I also wouldn't mind if I didn't wake up. That was I remember those thoughts. I had not much energy in me, and at the time the photo was taken, or a few weeks after that, my left foot swallowed up, and it was literally swollen like an elephant foot. Really huge. I couldn't get on a shoe, and I can remember having a job interview a few hundred meters from my home at that time, and I couldn't make it. I couldn't walk over there, because I couldn't put on a shoe, so I had to cancel that. And that made me, really scared, worried, wondering what's happening. I went to the doctor to do x-ray. They even did MRI. They couldn't find anything wrong with the foot. They even checked it for gout, and it wasn't that. So they were all puzzled. I was puzzled. And it was only later on diagnosed by a psychiatrist as a psychosomatic illness. So basically was having spent then, 10, 15 years not discussing my feelings, pushing myself so hard, and medicating myself with alcohol on it. And then at that time, the last 3 years, really, really ignoring my health and going down. So having bottled up all those feelings and emotions, it had nowhere to go. So it started to show up by that swollen foot. And that's when I got so scared and realized that, maybe this is it. So I wrote my will, my testament at that time, and really cleaned up my act, so to say, because I was certain I was going to die. And so that is indeed the lowest point of my life.
Wow. It's terrifying to hear. The body really does try to communicate to us, doesn't it? And how you described that idea of almost like pushing everything down. And it's like, well, where does it go? Like it has to go somewhere. And the fact that it was all stored there in your foot, almost like it was trying to get out, like trying to dispel through your toes, but it just couldn't move. And so in that darkest hour, when you felt that complete despair, that complete loneliness, I really relate to that word that you used, hopelessness. I think that's a really potent way to describe that feeling of, it's not like you're making a plan, but you just kind of think, maybe it would be easier not to be here. Like I really get that. And it's a really sad place to be. And I'm sure it's a place that many of our listeners can relate to being there too at times in their life. What was it, or was there a moment? How did you crawl yourself out of that? Was the decision to get sober something that came easily to you? Help me start to understand, for the person that I'm looking at today is a far cry from the version that you've just described. So, how did you get there, Nick?
Well, I understood that the drinking had to go, but I was terrified of it as well. I can remember trying a few times. I early the year before, so I managed to take 2-3 weeks off drinking from time to time, but at this time I couldn't manage that. I'd become a daily drinker. I also took a lot of medications, and living in Asia, I had even access to Valium and all this kind of medication. So I needed to take that in the morning to stabilize my nerves, so I should be able to work again. Nothing of that worked. And that made me even more terrified that I couldn't stop. I remember I tried to stop on my birthday on 2018, but I only lasted until lunchtime. Then I had to have a drink again because of the shakiness and my body just craving it too much. What happened then that changed everything, and the reason why I'm with you today was that I met a woman who today is my wife. I was getting ready to get remarried. She didn't know or understand that I was going through a difficult time. I had not been open and honest with her. And we were out having a good time and so on, like perhaps we had with someone when we just met. And at that time, then we started to plan to get married. And something inside me thought that I need to tell her how I feel internally. And for some reason, I asked to sit down on the sofa. And for the first time then, I spilled my heart out and I just shared how I felt. And that changed everything, because as you have this saying, a problem shared is a problem halved. And that's literally how I felt. And I can remember something being lifted from me. My body just felt light. I was tingling in my whole body as I shared what was going on. And from that, I really had a V-shaped sort of recovery from that episode.
Wow, how beautiful that you were able to share that with her. And in doing so, I imagine you grew so much closer because you really allowed yourself to be fully seen by her. And in that moment, she chose to fully accept you, which is so beautiful. I love that. I always have the audience in the back of my mind when I'm running these interviews with people, and I keep thinking to myself, I imagine there's so many people listening today who are exactly in that position where you were, Nick, carrying this secret, holding on to this shame and feeling like, I can't tell anyone. What would you say to them?
Yeah, it is about, trying to find the person who we can share it with. I'm lucky and blessed that my wife listened to me. She gave me that time and space. But even if it wasn't her, it could be anyone in the world, right? It can be a friend, it can be a colleague, it can be a doctor, it can be a support hotline or a 12-step recovery program, or anyone. The doesn't matter where you release it, as long as we share it with someone. And that was something that I hadn't done, because all of the stigma, the shame and everything, I just did everything I could to protect it. And I'm writing my second book now, and I call this particular step, I call it the surrender, which I'm sure you and many are familiar with, but I really dig down in that, because I would say it's that surrender, that moment of surrender, that saved my life and gave me everything I have today.
I love the word surrender, because it really does mean, doesn't it, to stop fighting. And when we're in that, I come from 12-step recovery. We call it a disease of addiction. When you're in that disease, you're fighting. You're fighting you're fighting everything and everyone. You're fighting the people around you. You've got an internal battle. You're fighting the bottle. Like there's so much fight. And if you think about it, if you've got your arms up ready to fight every single day, I mean, from a nervous system regulation standpoint, you're constantly in fight or flight. You're constantly activating your sympathetic. That's exhausting. Like you're going to be tired. And so in surrendering and putting the arms down, like literally putting down your swords like they did back in the day, and saying, I'm going to stop fighting now. That's like, it's so freeing, isn't it? Like it's almost like you can just take a deep exhale and feel lighter. And from that place, anything is possible. But while you're still fighting, trying to fight to keep up the facade, to keep pushing, to keep working, to keep people pleasing, to keep whatever it is that you're doing, nothing's ever going to change. So I love that you mentioned that. So that's one of the 5 steps to a life beyond your wildest dreams that you've created, isn't it? This idea of surrender.
Absolutely. And that is the workshop that, kept me busy for now 2 years, going around the world with this workshop, because coming into the workplaces, even though not everyone is sitting there with an alcohol addiction to surrender, everyone have perhaps some bad habits that is not serving them well. So in the workshop, I'm sharing my story, the story of many others, and what we have surrendered, and what happens when we do that. And then everyone has a chance to list down, go deep inside themselves and be honest with themselves, and making that audit of themselves to look, what is it that's not serving me well here? Did I used to read a book 2 hours in the evening before going to bed? And am I now spending that time watching Netflix or on TikTok, for example, and mapping that out? And then, as if you can imagine a leadership team where the boss is asked first and prepared before to share what is it that the boss will surrender, then you're giving some courage to the rest of them to take ownership. And we uncover in a workshop of 20 leaders, we will uncover gambling addiction, gaming addiction, sugar addictions. We will uncover normally in of 20 leaders, there will be actually 1 or 2 or even 3 stepping forward, ready to surrender the alcohol. There will be drugs, there will be all kind of things happening in a leadership team of 20. And here's their chance to surrender that in front of each other, so that and that set you up for the future. So it's a very, very powerful step, surrender indeed.
I have chills just even thinking about being witness to that. I have the privilege of sitting in rooms where people are surrendering every single day, but to see that happen in a workplace where there is so much pressure to have it all together all the time, it requires such a deep level of vulnerability to, particularly in a senior leadership team, with your colleagues, to say, actually, this is something that I'm struggling with, or this is something that I'm ready to let go of. And you're so right in that I don't know anybody in my life who isn't a little bit addicted to something. Whether it's food, whether it's shopping, whether it's their relationship and getting, the codependent relationship, it's a natural human instinct, I think, for most of us to have these little vices that play out, even if you're a really well-adjusted person. So I guess what I'm trying to say in that is there's absolutely no shame in saying, yeah, maybe I'm ready to let this go, or maybe this has been a bit of a crutch and I'm going to release it now. So how cool that you can create that environment in a corporate leadership team. What else is there in those 5 steps to living a life beyond your wildest dreams?
Yeah, so after you have surrendered, it's about the connection. And I mean, we are fortunate in the 12-step programs to work on our connection, right? Because we can work on our connection with ourselves by speaking openly and honestly in a confidential setting. And then it is that connection with a power greater than yourself. And then it is about the connection with other people. So that's what it's about also in the corporate world, how to really build stronger connections with your colleagues, be more vulnerable, see each other for who they really are. And it's not about encouraging them to overshare everything, to come in and scream out all the secrets in the office, but at least for a day when it's a workshop, consider that a safe space where we can be open and vulnerable. And then also then identify perhaps some other colleagues who you can build a connection with. Everyone has to nominate who will be there, sort of safe space in the workplace, who are the people that they can go to, so that when you come back into the office later, people look at each other in a different way, because perhaps they don't only see that person who is working so hard and pushing all the time. Maybe they also see that this person is going through something behind the scene. And we just did a workshop here in Phuket, Thailand, with the 5-star resorts on Friday, and many of those leaders have worked together for 20 years. And they had no idea some of the struggle that was happening and what was going on for some. And I remember one of the senior leaders who said about their colleague, "Oh, if I would have known this, I would have hugged you much more, but I promise I will give you a big hug on Monday." And isn't that the kind of workplace we want to come to, where we are much more closer? So indeed, connection is the following step there.
That's beautiful. And Nick, can I ask, is your dear friend Simon, who's no longer with us, was that part of the inspiration to really hone in on this idea of connection?
Yeah, absolutely. In 2019, I was 1 year into my recovery. So I had worked a lot on myself with doctors, with my wife, a coach, a psychiatrist, therapist, and also in the 12-step program. So I'm sober. I lost about 20 kilograms. So I'm back feeling much better about myself. But I had not yet shared this with the world. I was quite protective. The 12-step programs are even called anonymous. So I think this was programmed into me that we need to keep this secret. This is not something that we tell the world. We need to be very hush-hush and anonymous with this. But that day, that changed everything. And I will share the story of Simon. So Simon and I was working together on a project. We were going to do an event in Singapore. He was going to be a speaker. He just came back from Mount Everest. He climbed to the base camp there. And at this time, he shared on social media, that he's never been happier. So everything looked fantastic. But that day, Simon didn't show up. And I went to grab my phone to call him, but I have all these missed calls and messages that Simon had died of suicide. This was a big shock to me, and I had a lot of emotions running through me. I was angry at myself first for not understanding this and stopping him, because I saw him a few days earlier. And then I didn't know what to do. So I called up his brother in the UK, and we spoke about it. He also was shocked and surprised. And then I shared with him that I went through something difficult a year ago, and I wish I knew. Then I asked for the permission to share about it. I said, no one knows about my struggle. May I talk about it? And he gave me the permission to mention Simon's name. And he said Simon would have loved it, shout it out loud. So with that, I called up the Suicide Prevention Agency in Singapore and to become a volunteer and fundraiser. And I set up a fund where people could donate money to and so on. And I launched all of that along with a video note on LinkedIn sharing about my own story. So for the first time, I was not anonymous anymore. I was ready to take ownership for my fall and hopefully helping others with that to the whole world. I went out for a jog after posting this on LinkedIn, coming back an hour later, and this had gone viral. It was hundreds of messages, many shares, hundreds of comments, people sharing, people who had no idea, because all they knew, they only saw me as the successful person who was all having it all together, when it wasn't the truth. So that was the game changer. That is the moment when I was completely transparent with the whole world about my ups and downs. And that is the best step I ever done in my life, when I broke that confidentiality, anonymity, and was ready to take ownership and sharing with the rest of people as well what's going on.
Absolutely love that story. How beautiful that you can honor Simon in that way, and that you can remember him, and that it also gave you the courage to put light on your own story. And this is such a big part of why I started this podcast, Nick, because I felt the same. Working in a corporate environment, I was very much a high functioning alcoholic. I was going to the gym every day. I was managing a team, flying all around the world, and yet I felt like I carried this deep shame around my drinking, and I felt like I was a failure. I thought like there was something inherently wrong with me. Like why didn't I just have the willpower to stop drinking? It was and the inner critic would tell me it's because you're lazy, it's because you're not good enough. It's all these reasons that really kept me stuck and kept me drinking, because when you've got a noisy head like that, what's the solution to switching that off? It's alcohol. And so it's so toxic. And yet when we do the thing that feels like the last thing in the world that we want to do, actually sharing that firstly with another person to get sober, but then once you do get sobriety in check, then sharing it with everyone else, then guess what? Other people get to hear your story and identify. And I didn't feel like I really identified with anyone 5.5 years ago. I think the sobriety movement has grown so much in the last 5 years, which has been incredible to witness. But there was certainly no one that I could see on my social media or my LinkedIn who was a female my age in a corporate world talking about being an alcoholic. Like, it just didn't happen. And I think there's still a really long way to go, but I just was so passionate about creating a platform where people such as yourself could come on and share these stories so that someone else listening today can realize that they're not alone, because it's the loneliness that keeps us stuck. And to your point, you've written a book on executive loneliness. I think that's really where the disease thrives, in that loneliness, in that isolation, in that shame. So if you can talk to other people, or even if you feel comfortable enough, share your story, then that loneliness can't thrive. You mentioned something about smiling depression earlier, and I think that's a really interesting way to describe what this loneliness can look like. But for somebody listening who maybe doesn't quite understand, can you describe what that would feel like?
Yeah, so I would put on that smile to make sure that no one would ask me or push me harder about my feelings. I would just say everything is great, and I would share something that is happening and so on. Just to lead them away from not pushing to asking how I'm really feeling, right? And I was quite a jolly person, taking leadership when I was drinking, and in the sense that I became the president of the university golf club in Australia with 400 golfers. I was the president because I was probably the one who was, the most extroverted, the most initiative driven, creative, loud. But that was me on alcohol, and most of the time I was there. It wasn't because of the sport and so on. And I was the same in the environment around bars. I would hold people together and so on, but did it when I was drinking. So I always have that kind of smile on me. And I remember my wife, who I'm married with now, when I said that I need to stop alcohol, she said, "But how can you smile again?" But that was her take. She was worried that maybe I would never be able to smile again, because she always saw me, the introvert, quiet, a bit shaky, perhaps behind the scene. But when we were out in the environment, in the bar or wherever it was, when I was drinking, I was loud and joking and being someone who I wasn't. These days, my life is very different, and that smile was the fake smile. The real Nick is more of a, perhaps now I'm cycling a lot more, doing a lot of more sport, and doing very, very different things, reading more, taking things easy. I don't go out to the bars necessarily anymore. It's all a very different scene.
It's so true, isn't it? What your wife said, actually, I had the same thought about myself. I thought when I was going to rehab, I thought, am I ever going to laugh again? Am I ever going to smile again? Am I ever going to experience joy? And they were part of the stories that kept me from actually making that decision to get sober for such a long time, because I was a real party girl, and I identify with what you were saying about being president of the golf club. And, I was always at the forefront and bringing people together and the last man standing, all those kind of behaviors. But you're so right. We don't polish up our old life in sobriety. We get a brand new one. And I know for me, I was talking about this just the other day, that the laughter I experience now, it's a true deep belly laugh. I've laughed more in sobriety with other sober people a lot of the time than I ever did when I was drinking, because that kind of laughter, that kind of joy is almost a bit fake. Like, there's a little bit of alcohol creates almost like this numbing effect, right? And so I feel like it doesn't allow you to fully experience the true joy of life. Whereas when you're free from those substances, you actually get to have a full, deep, rich experience. So yeah, thank you for sharing that. That makes perfect sense to me. And I'm really curious to know, Nick, when people get sober, a lot of the time they also do the inner work. It's like we take away the numbing agent, and then it's almost like you're ready to look at the stuff. And you mentioned that you've had a psychologist, a psychiatrist, a therapist, a coach, that you've been part of 12-step recovery. So tell me, what has been revealed to you over the last 6 or so years that you didn't know about yourself, and how has that changed you?
Yeah, so the journey of recovery started a forever learning mindset in me, which I thought I was set. I'm already managing director and running businesses. I don't have to study again. But this recovery changed everything. I started to learn so much about myself that I become a student again. I have, since my recovery then almost 8 years ago, I just keep signing up for courses and so on. I become a certified master coach. I'm a certified sobriety coach, and I'm just about to finish actually a postgraduate diploma in psychotherapy and counseling to be a certified therapist and counselor, to be able to again help others that are going through these challenges. So for me, it has changed my entire outlook on life, and I have a bucket list of about 10, 15 more courses that I really, really want to do. So that should sort me out for another 5, 10 years with education, And interestingly enough, I just want to add that when I moved to Australia, aged 23, I actually wanted to study a degree in psychology. But at that time, I asked a few friends, and I asked my dad what they thought, and they thought it was a very dumb idea. So I changed my degree to a communication degree. But once I did my deeper work now, and with my coach and through my studies going back, looking over the major decisions in my life, which I had done by taking feedback from others rather than doing what my heart told me, I remember that decision I made age 23. And then with the support of my coach, I went back to redo that decision now. So now I'm 50 years of age. When I redid that decision was a bit over a year ago. So I was 49 when I finally signed up for that psychology degree, which I should have done so many years ago. So I keep saying, that when we do this work, it's never too late. We can turn back the time and we can redo those decisions that we made when we were the wrong person. Now I'm the authentic Nick, and I do what I should do.
Yes, it's so true, isn't it? I feel exactly the same way. It's almost like you get to course correct. Like when we're super highly focused people, highly successful people, and often, receiving a lot of praise and external validation for being that way, it's almost like you can become laser focused on the wrong path. And then when you stop pushing, when you stop forcing, when you remove the things and you're just left with your true authentic self, the path becomes so clear. And yet we question and doubt ourselves a lot of the time. And I had a very similar experience. I think that's why a lot of people get sober and their lives completely change, all areas, because I realized, anyway, I'll always speak for myself, that I woke up about a year sober realizing that I'd built a life that was entirely out of alignment with who I really was. And so we get that beautiful opportunity to do this work. And that's not just for people who are sober, that's for anybody who's willing to stop, to step off the hamster wheel, to actually look at themselves, to do the inner healing, and then actually become the director and the creator of their life rather than just a participant. I often find that this work, the inner work, the inner healing, can be more challenging for men to dive into as opposed to women. Do you agree? Has that been your observation? And what would you say to men specifically who perhaps are working in a corporate job, who are feeling disconnected? Maybe they don't necessarily have an alcohol problem, but they're stuck. They're on the hamster wheel. Maybe they're not feeling fulfilled. Maybe they're feeling deeply lonely. What would you say to them about doing this work, this inner healing?
Yeah, I completely agree with you. I did quite some research as I wrote the book Executive Loneliness on women versus men. And yes, if we're generalizing, I would say that men are more closed, men are less vulnerable than women. It seems like women have a few close friends who they are more open with. Men perhaps don't have them. And just like myself, I rushed from my stressful work to the bar to see my friends. But there we were joking, drinking, watching sport on TV. we didn't bother each other about the challenges we had. We were not open and vulnerable with each other. And that is in general what I'm hearing and sensing from men, that they are not so comfortable in being open and vulnerable as women are. That means perhaps also that if you're facing a challenge, maybe a woman is more likely to perhaps share what is happening with a doctor, more likely to get that professional support, and while the men would suffer in isolation or using medication or alcohol or something else to deal with it, just like how I dealt with it. So that's why the work I do with men, I run a men's group also for this reason, with successful men, where we practice being vulnerable in the good times. So you build up these. I talk a lot about the vulnerability muscle. It's about sharing and training this in the good times, because we all will go through crises and challenges. And when they come, if we have built up some strong connections in the good times, then we are likely to use them in the tough times. And I can just share one example here. It's one of the men in this men's group that a little bit over a month ago suddenly lost his mum. This is a guy who has been very close all his life. I started one-on-one coaching with him, and after a while he started to be trusting, opening up to me, sharing about some of the challenges he had in his life. We worked on them and he overcame them. And then the next step was, are you now ready to be part of this men's group, where we share in a WhatsApp group what's happening. We also have a call a few times a month when we get on and talk about our life. And he was ready. First come in as an observer, and after a while he started to open up in this forum as well, on the calls and in the group with the men. With that, he started to really start to feel some trust for the guys. And then his mom suddenly passed away. He was able then to share this in the group. So instead, he didn't bottle up the emotions, which he would have done otherwise. He would have grinded through this episode in silence and in pain. But now he could discuss it, and we encouraged him to, talk about your feelings, what you're going through, and so on. And this gave him then the strength to even write a speech for his mom's funeral, something which he would never have managed to do otherwise. So that's the power of doing this. And it doesn't have to be just addiction. It's about life. Life is happening, and it is about practicing being vulnerable in a safe place, and that then the help and the support is there.
How beautiful. I absolutely love that. And I couldn't agree more. It's so important to have a safe space that you can go to. So thank you for doing that work. Thank you for creating that space for those men. I think that's a really, really powerful act of service that you're offering there as well. Hey, Nick, I'm really curious, reading up on you and your successes. Fitness is a huge part of your life as well, and you've had some great success in this space. So can you share a little more with our audience exactly what you do to stay fit and how this has been such an integral part of your recovery as well?
Yeah, so in recovery then I thought, well, if seeking help for my alcohol issue had this tremendous positive effect on me, what about if I take every single other key area in my life to the best there is in that space and ask for help? So I then mapped out my whole life, what I was doing, and one of them was triathlon. So, okay, what should I do then if I want to improve my triathlon? Well, I should look up the best coaches in the world. And that's what I did. I looked up, his name is Jürgen Zach. He was 8 times top 10 world champion in Kona, Hawaii. And I looked him up and contacted him. He normally worked with only professional athletes, but I explained who I was and that I really wanted to improve, even though I'm a bit older than the typical athletes who is training. And he took me on. And so I started to train with him about 4 or 5 years ago. And he has a training camp in Phuket, Thailand. So he trained me first remotely, but then I started to travel over and train. And there were the Olympians, the world champions, and so on in his training academy. And I was an amateur, then hanging on for my life, trying to improve, just being curious and learning. And I improved. I started to improve and doing my personal best all the time, getting better and better and better, to the point where about 3 years ago, and as I did more inner work on myself, I mapped out where would I want to live, what should I do, and that's when I bought a small apartment inside this training camp. So that's where I'm sitting today, actually. So I'm outside here. I'm surrounded by all the best triathlon athletes in the world who's here. So that's my playground now. So it is, again, by just really identifying and looking at what we're doing and being open and vulnerable and asking for help. And this works in this sport as well. So we can apply it to all areas of our life. The learning from not being able to handle the alcohol.
That's so cool. I love that you got so obsessed with it that now you live inside the training camp. That's brilliant. That's awesome. Thank you, Nick. Thank you. Oh my goodness. I've loved this conversation today. And I think there's so many gems that you've shared with our audience that I hope they can take away, if not for themselves, then for people that they love. There's one final question that I ask all of my guests here on the show, and it's really about how you live life today authentically, stepping out from behind the smile. So please, Nick, could you share with us, what are your 3 non-negotiables that allow you to live your life today happy, authentic, and free?
Yeah, so the first one would definitely be health over money and fame. That's definitely the core one. And then also, secondly, is to express myself before I just say yes to something, or not to adapt to what others are saying. Like when I chose the wrong degree at age 23, that I actually sit back and think, what does my heart tell me here? That's the second. And then thirdly, it's really to be carrying this and passing it on to others, really every day, looking out for people in my community and see if there's something I can do to support them.
Love that. Thank you so much, Nick. Now, if people want to track you down, reach out, where should they go?
They can look up my website. It's nickjonsson.com, and it's spelled NickJonsson.com. Or I'm quite active on LinkedIn as well.
Fabulous. I'll make sure I pop that information in the episode show notes. We say here on Behind the Smile that when we recover loudly, no one needs suffer in silence. So thank you so much for your time today, Nick.